Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to power through a whole bunch of knife cut tests. I've got a whole bunch of knives lined up. I put a bunch through the old WorkSharp, and we're going to start with this one right here. This is the Ontario Rat 1.5. So this is right in between the larger Rat 1 and the smaller Rat 2 in terms of just overall size. I have a size large glove. I'm going to power through these in terms of getting it done and kind of knocking them out real fast. So I'm going to bring up the specs real quick down the side of the screen. If you want, you can go check out. I did a full review, and I will post a link to that up there in the corner. So where do my specs go? Lost my spec sheets. Here we go. Rat 1.5, 7.63 total length, 3 1/4, 3 inch with a 3 inch cutting length, 4.38 inches closed, got a 115 thousandths. Mine actually came in a little thinner at 96 thousandths, so pretty thin slicey blade here. Satin full flat ground G10 over steel liners is the handle, right at 4 ounces. Actually doesn't feel like that. It comes in nice. MagnaCut, this is a real genuine artifact here. MagnaCut, and the first time I saw it, I would swear to you it said 62 to 64 HRC. The only thing I can find now is 60 to 63 HRC. So we know these are definitely at least trending upwards towards the top end of that MagnaCut hardness scale. That makes this probably or potentially one of the hardest knives that we will test in terms of just blade steel edge retention. Problem with this knife here is the first time around, I told y'all it came with a terrible factory grind, and now I've had everybody else who's gotten one of these has basically come back and given me the same thing in the comments. Theirs was ground the same way. I'm telling y'all, if they used even a 200 grit stone and just left it at that, like a wheel, and they just buzzed across it once on each side on a 200 grit wheel, that's all this thing was to begin with. So I put it on the old WorkSharp, reprofiled it down to 18 degrees. I've got, you can see, almost a near mirror edge on the blade here. This thing is razor sharp. It is lights out, you know, yeehaw for that. This is a 10 out of 10 on the old redneck sharpness scale, which is exactly what we want. Just to get a general size, I'm only going to give you 2 knives because this is part of my new and improved speed dating process here. PM2, para 3, you can see this is a little bit closer. It's really right in the middle of these 2 knives. You couldn't be almost more perfectly in the middle of these 2 knives. So there you go, if that gives you a sense of the size. That's all I'm going to say. We put a brand new 18 degree edge on this baby. This thing should perform like a champ. Now, I have had several people say, hey, you really need to sharpen it 2, 3, 4 times before you really get to the best part of the steel. I ain't doing that, y'all. I got too many knives and too many reviews to get through here. I got a stack of knives I sharpened up, and I'm going to put through the cut test again. So we're going to see how it does with one good sharpening. I guess we can assume it would probably do a little bit better maybe if we gave it 2 or 3 sharpenings. But this is all I got, so let's get over to the table and start cutting.
All right, so we've got 386.5 square inches total. I am, interestingly enough, you can see there's a couple of these cuts that look a little rough, although it feels great. It feels like it's sliding through the cardboard, no problem. I mean, this is a genuinely good MagnaCut steel blade at a relatively high HRC rating. Part of the problem I'm dealing with, and I was doing a lot of cut testing during this session, is I've got some bad pieces of cardboard that have gotten wet and then kind of dried out a little bit. If you ever cut cardboard that's wet and dry, you'll know it totally changes the feel of it. It gets all floppy and mushy. It's not as easy to cut, actually. And it wasn't until this last board there where I actually changed my grip to hold my finger right up there on that front choil area, and that has allowed me to cut a good bit better. But nice thin blade going through the cardboard, no problem. Everything felt great. It just handles that cardboard, no problem at all. Let's see if it did any damage to the edge. And cut number 1 looks pretty good. Unfortunately, so does cut number 2. It's now, nope, sorry, I lied. It's not till we get after the next test where I see the first batch of little problems crop up. So we're still a 10 out of 10 after cardboard, which that's a very rare thing. So that, you know, reinforces the idea this is a pretty decent MagnaCut. I always like to do these little drag cuts. It does have the higher center line tip, so you do have to raise a little higher, but still no issue. We do all kinds of cutting in that format. Looking for this to cut right through the hose, nice and clean, no issues. I don't want to have to saw that hose. It's a nylon reinforced. There's thread through the hose. So no issues on the cutting there, nice and clean. Let's see now. This is where I run into a snag right there on the belly of that blade. And unfortunately, what we're going to see is that, once you get a real snag at some point in the blade, especially when it actually stops your cut, it's not going to go away. It's not going to get any better. And that's kind of the issue that happened with this knife during this test. This is our second test. First test didn't do very well at all. And we said that's because it wasn't sharpened first, didn't have a good edge. So I put a good edge on it. But unfortunately, something in this hose, and that's a pretty rare thing. Usually the hose doesn't make much of a difference, but when it stops the blade, stops it short in the middle of a cut, I can't give it any higher than a 7 rating, even if it'll cut past it. Rope, I'm looking for just a good rope pop here. I don't want to have to saw through it either, and you can see tears up the rope. Good bite into the rope here, very good with that. One of the better performances on rope, which you would expect from a good, nice, thin MagnaCut blade. Unfortunately, as mentioned before, we've got the same exact problem with that same nick on the blade, and it really kind of is a big disappointment. We'll get to that when we get to the results section. I was hoping for such better results out of this one, but something in the hose nicked the blade, and it's just not going to get any better once it goes past that. I will say it's hard to feel that nick in the blade. So let's move on and see how we do in the wood cutting. Start with the saber grip. I like that grip. I feel like it gives me better control, but also better distributes the pressure. There's less hot spots. I'm not getting any hot spots in the saber grip. Switch to a hammer grip here just to test. Sometimes you can get a little more power in that grip, but you definitely will feel it on the top of your hand. So you can see I switch back here again to a saber grip. Really good bite into the wood. That's worth mentioning as well. Doesn't feel like, I can't even feel the first original nick in the blade here. So let's see if anything has changed. Unfortunately, what would you expect? It's still going to have that same nick in the blade right there at the front of the blade. Never developed any other nicks. That's worth pointing out. And the rest of the blade feels very sharp. And if you cut fast enough, you can kind of cut right past it. So it's just that one nick in the blade. Unfortunately, on my rating scale, I can't give it any better than a 7 when there's a solid nick in the blade that stops the cut. All right, let's drop it up here. I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. I think I did, let's see here, I did about 20 strokes per side. So in case you're wondering, the brown side is a 16 micron stropping diamond emulsion, and the green side is a 6 micron. So I give it about 10 swipes on each side. Feels good, but I couldn't feel anything to begin with. Let's see if we got the nick out of the blade. So I didn't quite get to the nick area in that pass. I'm going to see if I can do a little bit better and get all the way out to the tip. And now it's clean. So whatever was there is gone. It just, something in that hose developed a tiny little nick in the blade. And unfortunately, you're stuck with that. Once you get it, you're going to have to strop it to get it out, and I can't strop it until I'm completed the rest of the test. So it is what it is. However, it did strop back pretty easily, back to a 10 out of 10. So let's take a look at the overall scores here, go through the results, wrap it all up. All right, so you can see here on this chart, we have this knife and the last 10 knives that we tested. It's all I can fit on the page anymore. I'll have to do a wrap up, like a big picture overview, maybe sometime, of all the scores. At any rate, Rat Model 1.5 and MagnaCut 60 to 63 HRC. Knife Steel Nerds rates this MagnaCut, rates MagnaCut a 5 out of 10, basically, on the edge retention scores. I did sharpen this one this time. I didn't sharpen it the first time. It didn't do all that great. I sharpened it today to an 18 degree, started 10 out of a 10, right? 387 square inches, still 10 out of a 10 after that. So cardboard didn't even damage it in the least bit. Ironically, the thing that rarely makes any difference, which is the hose cuts, was the thing that gave it just one nick in the blade. I've said that repeatedly, but on my rating scale, I can't give it higher than a 7 if it stops the cut because of a nick on the blade. Just one spot, and that spot never went away, obviously, but I never got any other nicks in the blade either. So don't know what it was in that hose that caused that. Did 11 cuts on the rope, which is pretty typical. Excellent rope pop, some of the best. Cutting through rope, really good bite into the rope. Still at the same 7 sharpness after we were done with that. Then we did the wood. That's really more ergonomics than anything else, although that does sometimes on cheaper steels that will knock the edge retention down. Didn't affect the edge retention at all on this one. In this case, Did strop it 10, well, actually about 20 passes per side on that double-sided strop. Got it back to a 10 out of a 10. So this knife performed better than the score really shows here. Because you get that one nick, and I can never rate it higher than a 7 as long as that's there, it just makes it look worse than it actually was. It was one place. The rest of the blade stayed razor sharp. I'm going to say it was basically a 10 out of a 10 on every other millimeter of that blade except for that one spot. However, it is what it is. I have to be honest about it, right? I couldn't even feel it with my fingernail. I kept trying to feel it. I couldn't even feel that. Excellent rope cut, excellent hose cut, really good ergonomics. The rat is a very actually ergonomic, lightweight, thin, thick enough to fill the hand in a saber grip, even with high pressure, you know, strength cuts there. No problems at all, no hot spots. Nice deep bite into the wood as well. I don't know why or how it got that nick in the edge in the hose, but it is what it is. Got to be honest. The rest of it, like I said, remained basically a 10. If it wouldn't have had that one little nick, it would have probably stayed a 10 out of a 10 for the whole test. As it's such, you know, I can only do what I can only do. Still, I think this is a great EDC knife. It's a great size. It's a perfect shape. It's a good weight. It's got great steel in it. It is purpose built for survival. So in terms of just what you want in a nice EDC knife, certainly in a survival knife, I think it's fantastic. I am glad I sharpened it and gave it another try, gave it an honest go. This is what I get. I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. I'll say it again. Several other people have said, you know, sometimes you have to sharpen it 3 or 4 times before you get to the really good part of the steel. Unfortunately, I'm just not going to do that, y'all. I have too many knives and I've got too many cut tests, and it takes so much time not only to sharpen a knife or a bunch of knives, but then to do these tests and the editing time it takes to put all these together. It's just a lot of work. I don't have time to redo, you know, the sharpening 3 or 4 times on any one knife just to put it through the test. It's a great knife. I love it. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 on edge retention, just because it went down to a 7. And this is the second time I put it through the test. Now, the first time wasn't sharpened very well. It didn't last very well either. As far as an EDC knife goes, I rate this a 10 out of 10. It's not fidgety. Probably should only get a 9 out of a 10 because it's not fidgety. But as I mentioned, size, shape, weight, purpose-built, quality of materials, fit and finish other than the sharpening job from the factory, all fantastic. I certainly highly recommend this knife for, I think, the 85 bucks that it costs. You're going to be hard-pressed to find a better MagnaCut, good quality, good heat treat steel blade out there for that kind of money. You're just not going to. And it comes with the rat name and you know, the history that goes into all that. By the way, in case you don't know, rat stands for Randall's Adventure Training. So there's your little bit of tidbit. In case you didn't know, I think everybody knows what the rats are. Otherwise, thanks so much for sticking with me. If you haven't already, we'd love to have you subscribe. Join our little band of renegades here. Throw me a thumbs up on the way out. Help me out with the algorithms. Otherwise, we will see you guys on the next video. Thanks very much and take care. Bye-bye.